It was a warm spring afternoon when Sarah Hamilton, a 19-year-old college student, returned home after a long, exhausting day of lectures and studying. She drove her old, rusted sedan down the familiar streets of her suburban neighborhood, windows rolled down, letting the breeze cool her face. Her mother's house was just up the street, a place she hadn't visited often since she'd moved into a dorm for school. But today, she needed a break, and the thought of her mom's homemade dinner was too tempting to pass up. As Sarah pulled into the driveway, she noticed two figures in uniforms walking slowly toward her car. They wore black polo shirts with a bold logo that read Neighborhood Patrol across their chests. She rolled her eyes, thinking it was just another attempt by the Homeowners Association to enforce their often ridiculous rules. At first, Sarah thought they were just offering a reminder about parking or lawn maintenance. But the officer's demeanor suggested something more. Before she could even grab her things from the passenger seat, one of the officers knocked on her window. "Excuse me, miss," he said, his tone firm and commanding. "You're parked in a restricted area. We need you to step out of the vehicle." Sarah's eyebrows furrowed. "What do you mean? I live here. I'm just visiting my mom." The second officer, a tall man with a stern face, leaned in and repeated the demand, this time raising his voice slightly. "We've had complaints about this parking spot. You need to leave the car and come with us." Sarah hesitated, confused and unsure of how to respond. Her gut told her something was off, but she never imagined things would escalate so quickly. Trying to reason with the officers, Sarah politely explained that she wasn't violating any rules. Her mother had lived in this neighborhood for years, and this was her house too, as she had a right to visit whenever she pleased. But the officers didn't seem to care. One of them reached for the door handle with such force that Sarah felt a twinge of panic. Before she could protest, the officer opened the door and grabbed her arm roughly, pulling her out of the car. Her heart began to race. "What are you doing?" she exclaimed, but the officer ignored her, pushing her aside. "Step aside, miss. You're making this more difficult than it needs to be," the first officer barked. Panic surged through Sarah. She tried to pull away, but the second officer stepped forward, blocking her way. She could feel her legs trembling, her mind spinning with thoughts of what might happen next. As the first officer began to speak about their supposed authority, Sarah's eyes darted around, searching for anyone who might be witnessing this strange and unwarranted event. From the porch of a house just across the street, Mr. Thompson, an elderly man who lived alone, had been watching the situation unfold. He didn't trust the neighborhood patrols, which had grown more aggressive lately, even sending out letters threatening fines for trivial matters. His gut told him something wasn't right, so he reached for his phone. Hesitant at first, he dialed his friend, Officer Daniels, from the local police station. "Daniels, it's Thompson. You might want to check out the situation on Maple Street. Looks like those whole guys are getting out of hand. I don't like the way they're treating that young woman." Officer Daniels promised to check in on it, but he was busy with other calls. Meanwhile, Mr. Thompson remained on his porch, watching as Sarah struggled to break free from the officer's grip. He didn't know how to intervene, not wanting to escalate things further. But his heart went out to the girl. Just as Sarah was about to break down in frustration and fear, a roar of an engine sliced through the air. Her heart skipped a beat as a sleek black SUV came speeding down the street, tires screeching against the pavement. The car screeched to a halt in front of the officers, and Sarah's eyes widened when she saw who stepped out of the vehicle. A tall, muscular man in military fatigue strode toward them, his face hard and determined. He moved with the precision of someone who had been trained for combat. The moment he stepped onto the sidewalk, the fake officers froze, their eyes locking onto him. He wasn't just any man, he was Sarah's father, Captain James Hamilton, a Navy SEAL on leave after a long deployment overseas. Sarah blinked, confused at first, but then her eyes filled with relief as she recognized her father's calm, commanding presence. Jim Hamilton's reputation as a decorated Navy SEAL had earned him respect both in and out of uniform. But what was most reassuring was the protective, unshakable love he had for his daughter. Jim's voice was steady, low, and laced with authority. "What's going on here?" he asked, addressing the two men who had been accosting his daughter. The officers hesitated for a moment before one of them stammered, We're with the neighborhood patrol. This young woman is in violation of HOA parking rules. She's being disruptive." Jim's eyes narrowed. He wasn't buying it. "I don't see any violation. What's your name and badge number?" The two officers exchanged a quick glance, realizing they had made a fatal mistake. They tried to deflect, but Jim wasn't fooled. "Show me your identification now," he commanded. When they hesitated, Jim's military training kicked in, and he stepped closer, his presence more intimidating than they expected. The tension in the air was palpable. Sarah watched her father handle the situation with an icy calmness, her heart swelling with admiration for the man who had always been her hero. The officers fumbled for their fake IDs, but Jim wasn't having it. He turned to Sarah, his face softening as he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Sarah, stay calm. These men don't have any real authority. They've been impersonating law enforcement." The second officer, realizing they were about to be exposed, shifted nervously. He tried to stammer out a defense, but Jim cut him off. "You're not getting away with this. I'm calling the police." Jim immediately took out his phone and dialed the police. His voice was firm as he reported the incident. While on the phone, the officers stood motionless, their fake bravado evaporating. Jim spoke with the local police, describing the men's lack of proper credentials. Meanwhile, Sarah could hear the crackle of radio static in the background of Jim's call, and it made her stomach turn with the realization that these men had likely done this before. Jim wasn't one to let injustice slide, and he wasn't about to let these men get away with intimidating his daughter. He ended the call with the police, who promised to send an officer to investigate. The fake officers stood there, sweating under the pressure, their earlier arrogance gone. Shortly after Jim called the police, he dialed the HOA president's number. He needed answers. "I just had an interaction with two of your so-called patrol officers who are harassing my daughter. I demand to know what's going on." The HOA president's voice was clipped and professional. She explained that the HOA did not employ such aggressive tactics. "This is highly irregular. I will personally look into it," she assured him. However, Jim wasn't satisfied. He demanded the names of the individuals who had been involved. Sarah could see the frustration building on her father's face, but she also knew he wouldn't stop until justice was served. She watched as he hung up and turned back to the officers. Later that evening, the local police arrived at the scene. Taking statements from Sarah and Jim, it didn't take long for them to confirm that the two officers had no legitimate ties to the HOA. And further investigation revealed that they were part of a scam that had been targeting several neighborhoods. They had been intimidating residents into paying fines for non-existent infractions. The fake officers were arrested on charges of impersonating law enforcement, and a full investigation was launched. Sarah was stunned by the scale of their operation. Jim, though, wasn't surprised. He had seen corruption in his career, but he was glad to see justice would be served. After everything had calmed down, Jim and Sarah sat on the porch of her mother's house, watching the sunset. Sarah, now feeling a sense of safety she hadn't known before, turned to her father. "Dad, I can't believe you handled all that so calmly. You saved me." Jim smiled softly, his eyes still sharp but filled with warmth. "You're my daughter, Sarah. I'd do anything to protect you. No matter where I am or what I'm doing, you always come first." The two shared a quiet moment together, both knowing that no matter the challenges life threw their way, they would always have each other's back. The world felt a little safer now, with Sarah's father by her side.